we've got a really cool session in store for you guys today. Really excited to have our special guest here joining us, Grant Gooding. And Grant is with Proof Positioning. He's the CEO of Proof Positioning. He's one of our partners. And Grant and his team use neuroscience, big word, neuroscience, to help companies understand what's most important to their customers. And that's what he's going to be unpacking for us today. So I'm super excited to have Grant join us. Grant, you want to say hi?
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you said that. I have a hard time pronouncing it correctly, so I'll get that out of the way. But thanks for having me. This is gonna be fun. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and we had this big argument before in the green room, everyone, on whether or not we should all wear pink shirts to support Grant, but we ended up not doing that today. So if you caught us on LinkedIn, we were talking about that a little bit earlier. So glad to have you, Grant. I know you've got a lot of interesting things you're going to share with us today. But before I get too far ahead of us, I wanted to introduce our co-host. And if you've been here before, it looks like we've got several veterans that are jumping on today. You know who Ryan Miller is. He's our SVP of Sales and Marketing. Ryan, you want to say hi?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Super stoked to be with you again today. Love seeing more and more familiar names that are registering and everything. And just pink was normally my color, Grant, so I just wanted you to have all the attention today. I just didn't want to take away from that. So super important. And yes, the number of times I had to type neuroscience into LinkedIn, I'm over it.
No kidding.
Couple things. Some of you I can see on here that I already know are registered for our in-person event, but tomorrow in the Centennial area, we're having a B2B Connect meetup. Paul's flying in. So we have a whole bunch of B2B marketers that are going to be hanging out, talking shop and learning a little bit tomorrow. So if you're in the area and you're not aware, just reach out and we'll make sure you get an invitation to that. So we're super excited about that. As if you've been here before, you know, we usually like to ask a couple of questions. So we'd like to ask a couple now. So first of all, what percent of decisions are made with our emotive versus our logic brain? So think emotions, logic. What percent are we kind of making decisions with, do you think, in your opinion there? The other one is, how much time do you think we have to hook website visitors?
I think we've got like 5 minutes or something, right? I think they come and they spend they read our whole website. Is that right? No, Lauren doesn't think so, right?
Oop.
Hey, Lauren, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? She's our moderator. If you've been around a while, you know who Lauren is.
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm Lauren. I'm here. I'm in the chat. I'll be catching any questions you guys have and saving them for towards the end of our show when we have a little Q&A session. So if you have any questions throughout the show, just drop them in the chat and I'll keep an eye out for them.
I think Sydney's nailed it. 95% emotive, 3 seconds. I think that's a pretty good guess, Sydney, for sure. And hey, Lauren, are you going to drop the agenda a couple of times as we go through it today?
Yeah. I mean, here's the first time.
All right, there you go. So we're not going to be sharing screens today, guys. We're just going to be kind of podcast style because Grant's got so much good stuff to share with us. But we did create this agenda that Lauren's sharing right now, so you can follow along with the questions we're going to be asking Grant. So, and definitely keep chatting in your questions, and we'll tee those up at the end, as Lauren mentioned. And I want to go ahead and jump into this because it's such a weighty and important topic. And at the end of the day, all of us, we just want our marketing to work better. And I think, you know, we're all kind of struggling with that right now with the headwinds that we're facing and the uncertain economy that we're dealing with. And I don't know about you, but many of us, or I've certainly done this many times where I've spent with the team, you know, lots of time, energy, and effort to create the perfect campaign. And then you launch the campaign, and then what happens? Crickets, right? Nothing. You think, where are the leads, right? They're not there. It's like where's the beef commercial from the 90s? Where are the leads? And they're just not there. And the reality is that most of the time when our campaigns fall flat, it's not because of the offer or our landing page or something like that. It's ultimately comes down to the words that we're using to talk to our customers. Because at the end of the day, people buy because of the words they read or hear, right? I mean, that's how we buy. We hear words, we read words. And if we're not talking to our customers with the words that they understand, we're not going to perform well. Ultimately, you know, people are people, and we tend to talk too much like, you know, as B2B marketers, we tend to talk like we're talking to companies and not people. But at the end of the day, people are emotional, right? We're emotional people. We're worried about things like impressing our boss and not having a campaign that doesn't work. We're worried about, avoiding pain. Those are the things that are happening inside of our head. And if we're going to be successful in B2B marketing, we've got to come alongside those conversations that our customers are having in their head. And ultimately, I think winning in 2025 and beyond is the company that does a better job of messaging and coming alongside using that language that customers really understand. And that's why we're super excited to have Grant here, because that's what his team is all about. They really understand how to leverage neuroscience. There's that big word again, to really get into the mind and the emotions of our customers and how they tick and how they make decisions. And so I'm super excited to jump into that. And that's what we're going to be unpacking for you today. And I think after today, you'll probably think about the way that you write your words and that copy differently from now on, because we'll be thinking about it through the lens of the way that our customers actually think and the emotions that they care about. And so what we're going to do today, like I said, we're not going to share any screens. We don't have a presentation, but I'm just going to ask some questions of Grant, and he's going to share us what he knows, and just excited to see where this goes. And, Grant, I got to say, the first question that comes to mind, this big giant word we keep using, right? Neuroscience. Like, help me understand why neuroscience. What's your backstory? Tell me how all this came about.
Yeah, well, completely by accident. That's the way all things work, right? I'm not a neuroscientist. If I would, you wouldn't want to hang out with me. I assure you. I really didn't even come from the marketing and agency world. I was a mergers and acquisitions analyst. And one of the things that you have to do when you bring companies together, and I worked on the legal side and the intermediary transition side, but the thing that was really that I liked and that's really challenging is integration planning. So basically, if you have two companies that are coming together, you have to make lots of decisions because there's lots of redundancies that happen. And so most of the time, you have tons of data. You have lots and lots of information around customers and supply chains and everything else. And so you make decisions based on those redundancies, and that's how you save money and how theoretically, when you have a merger, you're actually much better off. Well, there's a dirty, dark secret in this world, and that is approximately 70% of acquisitions are classified as failures inside of 3 years. So that means if you are a bread baking company, or you're a manufacturer that makes the plastic wrap that goes around bread, and you buy another company that does the exact same thing, okay, there's only a 30% chance that what you bought is going to be financially solvent inside of 3 years. It's a dirty, dark secret and is a massive wealth destroyer, but no one ever really talks about it. I mean, mostly because I think, what are you going to do? The Business Journal is going to cover the acquisition, but it's not like you're going to pick up the phone and go, hey, guess what? Remember that story you did on us a couple of years ago? Yeah, we totally ran that thing into the ground. I mean, so we sort of, these things sort of quietly happen. And I sort of became obsessed with figuring out, like, well, how the hell is that possible? There's so much that goes into the analysis of these acquisitions. There's got to be something that we're missing here. Like, what are we not measuring? And I had a hypothesis that we didn't know why customers were buying, and that was this really big sort of linchpin. And the reason being is, all companies are different. Typically, we see that a company essentially operates similar to the personality of the ownership. So if you've got an engineer that is a CEO, you can make some pretty reasonable assumptions, and that's the company's going to have pretty good operating measures. It's going to be pretty buttoned up, right? Probably going to suck at marketing, right? And vice versa. If you've got a more marketing, sales-minded CEO, probably going to be great at marketing, probably good at biz dev, and probably going to have a lot of inefficiencies in the infrastructure. We realized that the customers are most likely thinking similarly to how those businesses operate, right? Like, if you've got a real sales-minded customer, they're probably going to more naturally gravitate towards a more sales-minded organization because that's how human beings work. But we really had no way to measure that, especially quantifiably. So we started like experimenting with some methodologies and looking at, like, you know, asking stupid questions like, wait a minute, like what, like why do we use conversations and when we're doing research, right? Why do we use qual? Why do we use quant? Why do we ask multiple choice questions? Why do we ask true false? I mean, how do human beings make decisions? And it sent us down all these rabbit holes. And we had a few aha moments around, and one of them was around neuroscience, something that at the time I knew really nothing about. Like, I was just thinking, I wish I could forget quite a bit. Like, you have to read a lot of, I don't know if you ever tried to read a neuroscience paper. It's impossible because they're basically written for other neuroscientists. So you have to like have somebody translate the the gist. Anyway, so we had two big aha moments that we thought were really significant. And one of them was, it's actually sort of similar to this kind of first question that you asked, right? Like emotion versus logic. So we're all familiar with the left brain, right brain thing, right? Everybody sort of knows this. That's sort of true, but there's a more significant dichotomy that's happening in our brain. And it's this right here, which is the frontal lobe. It's the smart complexity brain. It's the part of our brain that does engineering and mathematics. It's the reason that we build buildings, right? And have, you know, a civilization. And then there's the limbic system back here, which is sort of the dumb brain. And there was this guy named Antonio Damasio, who was a now very famous neuroscientist at USC. And he was studying a group of people that had a specific type of head trauma where they really weren't able to use a lot of the base systems in the limbic system, right? Limbic system controls very important things, a lot of things, but specifically for our purposes, beliefs. Beliefs are the most important thing that you need to understand as a marketer, okay? Human beings have beliefs, and these are not just like big things like religion and politics. It's like, I kind of make a joke that there is a belief that there is a correct way to load a dishwasher. It's a real thing. And that's what is, you know, that's what you fight about with your spouse, because there's a correct way to fold towels, right? These are actually beliefs. How you shake somebody's hand, right? How you dress, you believe these things. And when you get messages like you were talking about earlier, Paul, that are contrary to that belief, you create something called cognitive dissonance. And when you create cognitive dissonance, you go right into fight or flight, and if you're in fight or flight and you're in the business of marketing or sales, that's where the crickets come from. No sales happen if you're fighting the idea or you're bailing. So what Damasio was able to figure out, studying this very interesting group of people, was that they were almost complete. They could only really use the smart part of their brain, okay, which he ultimately sort of defined simplistically as an options processor. And he said that they couldn't even make even the most simple decision. And he used an example of how they couldn't even decide what they wanted to eat for breakfast. What happened was he asked them, and what followed he called endless logical deliberation, right? Which you can only imagine was something to the effect of like, I had oatmeal yesterday, I could have oatmeal today. One time I read an article that said you eat oatmeal every day, it's good. You know what I mean? And so he had this hypothesis that, wow, maybe we're not this balanced left brain, right brain sort of species like we've always thought. Maybe we actually make our decisions back here. So Sydney, I think you're saying earlier, is probably right. Like the general consensus is somewhere between 95 and 100% of our decisions are made. Some people think it's 100, it's pretty aggressive. But about 95% or so of our decisions are made with our emotional brain. And so we were like, holy crap, that is awesome. How do we like take advantage of that? Like if we could identify that if there's some sort of emotional trigger when you are selecting a company that you're going to do business with, if we could quantify that, that'd be super like helpful. But we had no idea how to do that. Enter in, I guess, the second question, which do a good job with your research. The second question, which is speed. Okay, so there's a guy named Daniel Kahneman. He wins the Nobel Prize. He's sort of the inventor of behavioral economics. And he writes this book called Thinking Fast and Slow. It's an extraordinarily hard book to read for those of you that have attempted to read it. It's very hard. But the general premise is that there is system 1 and system 2. The two same parts of the brain that Damasio was talking about. System 1 is the emotive brain, where our emotions, our beliefs, our memories, this is where all this is. And then our smart brain, system 2, the calculator. And what he was able to uncover, mostly through research conducted by Johns Hopkins, is that those two brains operate at incredibly different speeds. Thinking fast here, thinking very slow here. And so the correct answer, I don't know if anybody got close to it, but the correct answer as far as speed is concerned is approximately 200 milliseconds. Okay, so you're talking about
200 milliseconds?
A fifth of a second is about what you got.
Yeah, I think I saw a 15-second guess. Yeah, in my head, in case you're wondering, I had 4 seconds in my head. I've always heard that, that kind of that first impression sort of baseline. But what was the number again, Grant?
It's 200 milliseconds once the input hits your lens. Okay, so but we make judgments. Now, we make those judgments not because we're like intentionally judgmental. It's actually a survival mechanism. So this is a really important rule of thumb for sales and business in general. The brain is unbelievably lazy. I always say it's the second laziest organ in the body. That'd be a nice question. What's the first laziest organ in the body? If anybody gets that right, throw that into chat. What's the first laziest organ in the body? The brain really is the second. I equate it to water in that it will literally find the path of least resistance in order to get to a solution. So the less that you can make someone's brain work, the better things will be for you if you're trying to convince them to do something. So that's why we generally Ryan, I don't know, like skin. I saw you say skin. So many people say skin. I don't know why. Skin actually works really hard.
I could go both ways, but I thought I would, show my massive brain by knowing that skin was an organ. So that's all I got.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's impressive. Grant, this reminds me of, I'm a big fan of Don Miller and StoryBrand. I don't know if anybody's ever read that book, but, I actually went to one of his StoryBrand conferences a few years ago, and he talked about kind of a similar thing. And that is that, this all goes back, this brain being lazy kind of goes back to our caveman days, and we're trying to conserve calories, right? So if the brain can do something that takes less calories, then I need to go find less food. And if I need less food, then I can survive longer. And ultimately it's a survival instinct. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. They're called schemas, actually. There's an old psychologist, whose name escapes me, unfortunately. Doggone it. Really, this is humans have theorized, like Immanuel Kant theorized, that these schemas sort of exist. They're essentially shortcuts, and that your brain creates, and it creates lots of shortcuts. Like walking is a schema, right? We don't have to think about walking; we just do it. And it's also a very good lesson in branding, right? If you can get someone to think of your company via an idea, it creates a mental shortcut. It's totally cheating. All the best brands essentially have accomplished that. It's like a fun little trick you can do. Like, well, here's a good example. Like if I say affordable airline, you say
Southwest Airlines,
right?
Nope.
And yeah, so here's the thing. It's funny. Typically everybody says Southwest Airlines. If you wait just a moment, someone will then say Spirit.
Say Spirit.
Now here's the reason why that happened. So first of all, the idea of Southwest Airlines is owned in your head, even though they haven't been the most affordable for well over a decade. So they still own that idea. Spirit, technically and correctly, is the one that actually owns that position. But whenever I do that in front of a large audience, you hear like a choir of Southwest Airlines, and then you can snap your fingers, and then you hear Spirit. Now, what is that? That's that 200 millisecond effect at work, right? It had to go away from the belief part of the brain and activate the smart part of the brain and go, oh wait, that's actually not true. So it's a huge advantage to be able to exist as a schema, if your brand is a schema inside of the limbic system of the brain, because the brain will acknowledge you immediately when it thinks of an idea. Most people think of it backwards. when they think of us, I want them to think X. No, you don't. You want them to think of an idea and then think of you as the one that owns that idea.
Mm.
And I'm assuming this is true in B2B and B2C, right? Even if we're selling big, complex things like this audience here that's watching us today, they're B2B marketers. They're selling boring, expensive stuff, right? That takes forever to sell, complex buying committees. This stuff works in B2B too, right, Grant?
It works actually better in B2B than it does in B2C. Oh, wait a minute. Robert just said Piaget. Jean Piaget was the name of that psychologist. I couldn't remember if you want to look him up. He's kind of an ornery dude. Anyway, yeah. So most people think, oh, B2B is like boring. Absolutely not true. Okay. And here's the reason why. B2B is kind of like a big family, if you think about it. We support each other. We're part of each other's supply chains. We participate in the same upturns and downturns as each other.
That's a really good point.
B2B is actually a very big sort of very interconnected. And if I'm part of somebody's supply chain, or I provide them a service that allows them to be more successful, I'm going to be emotionally resonant to them. Emotion doesn't mean like flowery language. It just means we're able to make a connection to something that's an important trigger in our limbic system. So, for instance, I was in a meeting. I was in a meeting yesterday morning where we were in a conference room at in some conference room that we didn't know, and I was trying to throw something up on a screen, and they had some really fancy system. Nobody could figure out how to get it to work. And so, for instance, let's say that you are the company that has that really sophisticated system, and I said, "Hey, tell me what's important. Tell me the real significant value, the top 5, top 10 value propositions as to why your AV system is the best." They're going to say stuff like, you can simultaneously run audio, video. You can stream it. It's high quality 1080p, right? Like and they're going to name all this stuff. But what they don't realize is there's something incredibly insulting about what really is valuable. And that is, you can turn the damn thing on. Okay. Which we could not figure out. And everybody was, the client was all upset. They couldn't figure it out. And they don't realize that there's an ease of use concept here that probably nobody at that company is thinking about and would never use in any of their value propositions. But when it comes to the customer's perspective, does the damn thing work? And so it's a complete misconception that you can't use emotionally viable language when you're selling in B2B, because you totally can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yesterday you had mentioned something. I want to just take a quick step back, and maybe you've touched on this a little bit already, but just to get your perspective on it, because when we were talking through this yesterday, you mentioned that it ultimately is an equation. Like, this kind of stuff really comes down to math. What were you talking about there, Grant?
Oh, yeah, I was kind of making a joke that well, it's not really a joke, but that our like positioning statement is a math equation, right? So,
oh, gotcha.
So we say, like, our positioning statement is, we're a customer insights company that measures emotional resonance to tell you what is most important to your customers. So that when most people come up with that type of language, like, hey, what do you do? Like, what's the thing that you say, right? Hopefully at this point, you already know an elevator pitch is out of the question, because you don't have 30 seconds.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right. So it's like, but there's a reason that we say those things and in that order. So the first thing is, we're a customer insights company. If I don't tell you that first, your brain will constantly be searching for a file, right? So the brain operates very similar to a file cabinet, and it goes through and it's looking for tabs. It's looking for what they call it an objective hook, right? So there has to be some type of objectivity that we can classify categorically, like what is this company? So I have to say we're a customer insights company so that you can understand what that is. We could say we're a research company, but we're a little bit more specialized than that. But we're a customer insights company. If you don't know that, you'll probably miss the next thing I said, because you're searching your files for, what does that mean? So the next thing is that measures emotional resonance. Why do I say that? Because it's intriguing, and the brain loves intrigue. So by saying that as a qualifier to being a customer insights company, I've given the limbic system permission to go into the buying part of the brain, the midbrain. And now I've created intrigue. Intrigue is what makes you unforgettable. And that's why we say that. The last part, I don't care what that is. We do research on ourselves about twice a year, and we test a whole variety of value propositions on ourselves. And whatever's in first place is what we say at the end. So for the last 2 years, the most emotionally resonant message we've tested across agencies, big businesses, small businesses, is we can tell you what's most important to your customers. The reason I think that's valuable, so it's a math equation, right? It's right. A, then B, then C, and it's done in a very specific order. But I think the reason that specific concept does well is if you know what's important to your customer, your whole business becomes easy, right? What services you provide,
you just kind of
how you provide
exactly
them.
how neuroscience works, right? You started in the back of the brain, you worked up to the midbrain. I mean, that's such valuable. This is that same equation. The folks that are listening in today could follow a very similar equation.
Yeah, it's just it's the little tricks. Like, don't make the brain work if you can at all avoid it.
One thing I want to add, so is it April? Is it Dunphy? I can't remember her last name.
April Dunford.
And Dunford. So she's got this whole positioning thing. And another way to think about that too, that really stuck with us was if you don't tell your audience who you are and what you do in that, very short amount of time, you're not giving them context. And if you don't give them context, they will contextualize you into their library, their catalog. And what we see a lot of times, Grant, you probably see this too, is brands often get miscategorized. They get mislabeled into a different bucket, and the prospect or the person or the visitor or whatever might go, oh, that's really cool, but I don't need that right now. When they miss the opportunity to contextualize it for that visitor to say, nope, actually, we do exactly what you're looking for. Here's how it is, and here's how easy it is to consume. We see that so often. It's just missing the boat on telling them what they do. And it's not easy.
That reminds me very similar to what Grant said about the file cabinet, right? If that file folder doesn't exist in your brain, probably not going to file that vendor in there, and because you're now asking the brain to work and go, no, you got to go create a new manila folder. You got to put the tab on there, what that manila folder is all about. Then you got to stick the vendor in there. People are going to go, no, I don't want to do that. That's too much work, right? So they're going to move on to something else. Well, I know we covered speed, we covered emotion and logic. The next one on the agenda here is the whole idea of fear versus opportunity. I think this is an age-old discussion, right? It's like, do we scare them into buying, or do we encourage them into buying with all the good stuff that's going to happen after they buy? Which one works better? Are there times we should use one over the other? What's your research telling you on that, Grant?
Well, I think the scientific community would probably say that fear works better, right? We are a very fear-based species. Fear has made everyone here do something that they're ashamed of, right? Or can't believe that they did. And it's because our brain really is an organ that is its central function is to keep us alive. A lot of the things that it does, it is a survival mechanism. And so it's really just kind of rooted in your DNA. Opportunity falls in I would say, a far second place in that dichotomy. But when fear is, it's kind of like Maslow's, right? Once you've covered, right, and we're not afraid, then opportunity can take over and be powerful. But from a messaging perspective, we test lots of stuff, right? You can come up with a fear-based or an opportunity-based concept for anything, right? So if you're a supplier of a part for a printer or something, right? Like there's essentially two simplistic approaches you can take to this idea, which would be the idea versus downtime versus uptime. So we do that all the time, where we test these dichotomies to see, hey, is it actually more emotionally resonant to your customers that they not experience any downtime? Or is it more emotionally resonant that they experience a very high 99.9% uptime, right? Or whatever. And most of the time, the fear-based concept does work, right? I don't think you should ever scare anybody into doing anything, but alleviating downtime is essentially a fear-based concept. So you saying like, hey, we're going to alleviate downtime is going to work better typically than if you say we guarantee uptime.
That's interesting. I can tell you just from personal experience, I try to post every day on LinkedIn something useful to the audience. And when I talk about problems and the consequences of those problems and then how to overcome those problems, those posts always do 10 times better than opportunistic type posts. So if you start with a problem and say, hey, if you don't fix this, here's what's going to happen. And then here's some steps to overcome that. Man, those always do way better.
It's hard sometimes even writing that stuff though, Paul. I don't know about you, but like you're doing it wrong. Oh, I hate writing that. Versus, oh, you're doing these things well. And then later on in the post, you would say, here's the things that you're probably not doing well. And but you're not doing it well 10 times out of 100 or 100 times, and you'll get way more clicks. So bingo.
It's really crazy. The way I get around that, and Grant, I'd love your perspective on this. When I write a post that I know is going to be negative, I always use the word we instead of you. So I'm trying to be empathetic. Hey, this is impacting all of us. This is a problem that we are all overcoming or all dealing with. And if we don't deal with this problem, here are the bad consequences. And here's what we found can help you overcome that problem. That seems to work better than when I say, you have this problem, right? It's because I feel like, to your point, Ryan, it's almost like we're saying we're better, we're smarter, we're whatever, but we can be empathetic when we use the words we. What do you think about that, Grant?
I'd say it really depends on the kind of the use case. I use you a lot, but I don't doing it. You have to be careful not to attack people. Okay. So when you attack someone, you put them on the defensive and you activate that fight or flight brain. And
That's
so
right.
You can say you, but don't, like, I would never say you're doing this wrong. It would be like the reason why you're struggling with this. Or something like that. Like if you go look at all my content posts, they all follow a pretty similar cadence, and it's usually something fear-based. I mix it up a little bit, but it's usually something fear-based, like the reason, the 3 reasons why you're losing sales and no one's calling you back, or something like that, right? And I would use as maybe an empathetic solution, like. I don't know. You do what makes you comfortable, but
that's Grant's nice way of saying that's a really dumb thing you're doing, Paul. I would do it.
I mean, look, we have like a credo at our company, and it's people are pretty damn different. Yeah. And bell curves exist for a reason, right? There are people that exist on all sides of everything, and they have different beliefs and they have different ways of thinking. And some people like solving problems themselves, and some people like having other people solve it for them. And so I try not to. There's really no magic solution for anything. If you're comfortable saying we, do it. Just make sure you're bringing up a really good pain point.
Yeah.
My other recommendation would be like, don't directly attack someone, because that will not work.
Yeah. In a way, though, that's kind of interesting. This is why doing customer research is valuable, because I think we all walk into marketing, especially with bias, like, oh, this is the way my customer thinks, or this is the way they should think, or this is how this message is going to resonate. But unless we actually talk to customers, we'll really never know. It's just going to be based on bias and assumptions.
Yeah. And we've got loads of those. Like you were saying earlier, I mean, it's hard, like Ryan, when you're talking about how like there's a massive disconnect between how did they not get that that's what we do? And it's because we live inside of these 4 walls, right? And the 4 walls inside of the company are real. And I've been measuring this. I have this one stat that I've been measuring for about 11 or 12 years. And I don't even like to tell people what it is. Paul, I think I told you about this. I don't like telling people what it is, because I will actually, when I tell people, I create cognitive dissonance, and then they don't like me. And so I typically don't tell people, but like, we're in the business of mathematically proving this thing that you do, this thing that you say is going to be the best thing that you can say to this audience, right? Period. And so we've been measuring that for over a decade. And we ask CEOs, we ask top of marketing, we ask top of sales, hey, here's all the stuff you say as an organization. Which one's in first? And how often do they get it right? Slightly better than if a computer randomly guessed. That's how often they get it right.
That's crazy.
About 1/4% more successful than if a computer randomly selected it. And it's not because these people are stupid, and it's not because they're not trying. It's because we live in two totally different worlds, like that example with the AV system and the customer usage, right? There's probably no department in that AV thing that's called like ease of use. There's no like person that's hyper focused on that. It's all engineers trying to figure out how to make the coolest widget and how can we add more widgets that will theoretically make us more valuable, when in actuality, the customers aren't asking for any more features, right? They're asking for a very important feature called turn on, damn it. And like, where's that button?
Yeah.
So, so it's just an inherently challenging thing to understand. And that wall in between you and your customer is just much higher than people think it is.
Yeah. I was listening to one of your podcasts, getting ready for today's show, and, or an article. I can't remember where I consumed this, but you're explaining this idea, this clapping test, where if you want to prove that people live inside the walls and inside their head, go to a stranger or somebody and try to clap happy birthday, the song Happy Birthday, and ask them what song you just clapped. And in your mind, happy birthday, you're hearing the song and you're clapping, but the person that's quote unquote your customer in this experiment is just hearing the claps. And you're like, what song did I just clap for you? And they're like, I have no clue. Yeah. But we hear it because we hear the song in our head, right? But they don't hear it. Or Mary Had a Little Lamb. You can do it in many different ways. And when I heard that, I went to my wife. I had to go see if that was real. So I went and clapped happy birthday to her. And she looked at me like I was an alien from outer space. So we do have such bias about what we think our customers really know and care about. So it's important to go out there and ask them. Well, good. Well, let's move on to really the next thing. I want to get this kind of actionable and tactical. So the next item on our agenda is 4 tricks to communicate with the buying brain. So this is something we talked about in getting ready for the meeting. What did you mean by that, Grant? What are those 4 things?
Well, it's hard to make them universal, right? Because every organization is different, right? Most people don't realize it, and they look very homogenous from the outside. And there is some value that you are providing that is important to customers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in business. You'd be a commodity and you'd be traded on a board downtown. But there are a few very simple tricks that will work for everyone. One of them is the idea of communicating and being objective, okay? So the basic difference between objective and subjective is something that's objective is the same in everybody's head. Objective or subjective is something that can be different in everybody's head. So a very simple example is a price. Price is the same in everybody's head, but the word of expensive could be different in everybody's head. So when you say expensive, you use some type of subjective language, which salespeople and marketing people are incredible violators of this principle, because they want to use flowery language instead of being clear. And it's one of the worst things you can do. So like, for instance, when we test concepts and I'll say, all right, well, tell me about your product. We have really high quality. Okay, well, quality isn't even actually mean anything. It's barely a word, okay? Like, it's a lazy amalgamation of things that actually are important. So what makes up quality? Is it product? Is it the density of your product? Is it the defect rate per million? Is it how long it lasts? Like, those things are actually important and emotionally resonant. Quality is a garbage word. No one should ever use the word quality, customer service, or trust. They should never come out of your mouth if you're in marketing or sales, ever.
Say that again for the people in the back of the room, because we hear that all of the time, right? Oh, what's your differentiated value? Oh, we've got great customer service.
We're people.
Okay.
That's my other one. We have great people.
We have great people. Yeah. No one cares. Like literally, nobody cares about your people. There's an article on our website called "Your Customers Don't Care About You," where I go through a lot of math and show you that they literally do not care about you. One of the worst things you can say, for instance, if you're trying to sell someone, is to tell them about your awards. Agencies, like it's nobody gives a crap about your. They simply don't. They really, really don't. And that's been something we've measured, I think, over 100 times now. So it's pretty conclusive that this is not something that we should be talking about. But what we're missing is that customer service is a garbage word. But the ideas you can create objective ideas underneath it that are valuable. So instead of saying we have great customer service, you can say all of our clients get the cell phone of their representative. That is a very effective and objective idea that means customer service. So it's just think through what you're saying, and instead of having a lazy amalgamation, which we do in language all the time, is think about what's the stuff. Oh, well, that's boring, or that's way too specific. But that's how the brain works. The brain is specific and boring. It needs that objective language. Second rule is simplicity. Idea needs to be objective, and it needs to be simple. The brain absolutely hates complexity, and it hates confusion. Nothing will send you into fight or flight faster than complexity. One of the biggest rules of thumb is no one gives, can I cuss?
Go ahead.
No one gives a shit how your stuff is made. They do not care. If there's gear, yeah, but then this happens, and then the flange goes like that. If customers just, I don't know how many number of engineering CEOs who have been like, Grant, if they can just understand how it works, they'll buy it. And like, nothing could be further from the truth. No one cares how it works. Please, please, for the love of God, don't talk about it. And if you're a good salesperson, you already know that this is true. Use very simple ideas. Use emotional language, anything. And that doesn't mean flowery. That means, is this thing important to the person I'm talking to? Is downtime important? Yes. Is quality important? No, because we don't know how to talk about it. And the last thing is singularity. Use singular ideas. Okay. So we couple language a lot, and we think we're being efficient, like we're trying to cram as many ideas into each sentence as possible, especially when we're writing copy. But that's not, the brain doesn't like to do that either. And it also is it's very challenging for you to reverse engineer what's important to someone when you use combination language. So let's say that you send out, so let's say you're coming up with ad copy, and and you're sending out ad copy that says, all right, let's just make it as terrible as possible. We have the highest quality and customer service in our industry. Okay. And then we A/B that, right, with something else, maybe an image or whatever. Okay, well, first of all, we shouldn't say those two things, but second of all, that's two ideas. So how are you supposed to effectively A/B something when there's two ideas in there, right? The best thing you could do is say, we have leading, we have the best customer service and we have the highest quality, and then see how those perform. That will at least give you some metric that you can work with, that you can actualize on the back end.
Ryan, I can feel you kicking me under the desk all the way from here. I think I fail at every one of those. Maybe not the first one, but
and I'll throw the empathy card on the table, because it's hard, because so many of us are proud of what we do. We're proud of the teams. We're proud of the people. We're proud of the service. We're proud of all this stuff. And we want to tell everybody about everything. But when you do that, Grant, you lose people. It's too much, right? My brain is having to glom onto this and glom onto that. Oh, I really like that. Oh, that's interesting. It's too much stuff, right?
There's the curse of knowledge, right? We just know so much. We just want to, especially, I mean, I'm talking for myself, but I just want to vomit all that information that I know out on front of everybody, and it just makes them want to run for the hills.
Yeah, well, let me throw one thing in, Paul. This is not you, but I've worked with a lot of engineer CEOs too, Grant. And one of the things I think they operate out of fear, and you can disprove this or not, but I think they operate out of fear that they don't want to look foolish. They don't want to sound like they're not buttoned up. They don't want to leave anything out for fear that another engineer who might buy their stuff, oh, you forgot that one detail. Ooh, I would have done it this way. I think they're just paralyzed by this fear of not sharing every single detail.
Yeah, and engineers are essentially deductive reasoners. Okay, so I have 3 kids. I have 2 boys. My 2 oldest are boys, and they are like opposites of the spectrum. I have one inductive thinker and one deductive thinker. And that just means that one of them, it thinks from the bottom up and one thinks from the top down. And so if I'm trying to like teach them something or communicate something important, I have to realize I have to communicate to that person differently. Engineers start with the details and then build up. So they're typically really bad at vision, but they're really good at sort of thinking abstractly about systems. Whereas you take an inductive thinker, like a salesperson CEO, right, or a high ego CEO, and you start talking to them about details, they're done, right? You've got to you have to set vision with them and talk to them in simplistic, objective, and direct terms. So there's no correct answer because humans are just so different. I see somebody just added best in class to my list. Alexandra added best in class to the list. I haven't seen best in class. People don't use that very often, but that would definitely fall into the same principle as quality, customer service, and trust. That's good.
The slight variation we do see all the time, and I think a lot of us are guilty, is the best practices. It's a similar notion. Like we leverage best practices to deploy your blah, blah, blah. Similar to your argument, Grant. Like, what does that mean? Best who, how, what?
Yeah, that's kind of like going, ooh, well, that's not us saying best.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's better than saying we're competent. We know what we're doing. Yeah, there are tricks around saying really bad generic language.
There's a lot of it in B2B for sure.
I know we're going to start landing this plane here in a second, but the things that I've really captured today, Grant, that I want to even play with more is this fear concept, and not to drive action, but the fear that we are born with and that brain keeping us alive. And I feel like, and again, I think we're guilty in some ways, I feel like we're driving visitors to our site, prospects, those who engage, not our brand per se, but the messages that we say, immediately is evoking that sense of fear because they're trying to contextualize, they're trying to process it, but their butts are on the line to hire approved positioning, a vendee, any service group that's going to help, or even picking out a, specific pump, the 49XC3000 that does 6,000 gallons a second. If that pump doesn't do its job, they have failed. And that is one thing that I'm just really soaking up today, because if we ever create a sentence for any of our prospects or even customers that feel like they might fail with us, boy, that sends them down a whole different path.
Yeah. I got started in the 90s, and I'm sorry, Ryan, I know you hate it when I say that, but back then in technology sales, there's this saying, you never got fired for buying IBM. And that's exactly what you just got through talking about it. IBM did this thing where it was the safe choice. And somehow we've got to create the safe choice with our customers, right?
Yeah, you just have to find out where that fear exists and how to alleviate it. We did a study for a management consulting firm once, and there are a lot of variables in that. And one of the things that we tested, they had us test all kinds of weird stuff, like will make me look good in front of my boss, or will help me get a promotion. If you don't think that's not irrelevant to your target buyer, it is. I don't have to do any work. Humans don't like doing work either. If you can do it, and one of the things that they tested was it was something around I won't have to hire somebody else. And I was I remember trying to wrap my head around what did you mean by that? And they said, well, it's really, really common that you engage with a firm and then there's some failure, and then you have to hire again and hire again. And it's this cultural thing that I didn't really know a whole lot about, but they're like, oh no, it's a thing. And that was the most important thing, had the highest emotional resonance of anything we tested. And so that's what they led with. And that's their tagline. several years ago. I can't remember exactly what it was, but that was like one of those very strange fear alleviation techniques that nobody was saying, right? Because everybody in that space talks about their expertise, and they're all saying we're IBM and we're IBM Light and all that stuff. And they were like, nope, if you do this, you won't have to hire this other person. And that was it.
My favorite one on that too is collectively we have 250 years of experience.
Yeah, means you have like 10 really old people. That's funny.
Yep.
Well, so Paul, do you want to move into some other kind of takeaway things here?
Yeah, let's just wrap. If you want to tee up that last topic, Ryan, that'd be great.
So, I mean, audience, there's a lot. We've gone down a lot of pontification, some theory, but thanks to Grant, a lot of it's data backed, which is good. So even there's a couple things, Grant, that you validated for me that I'm like, oh, he actually proved that. Okay, sweet. I'm going to use it now. But a couple of things, like what are, let's just say 3 things that you could go play with today, or you could share with the audience today, like, focusing on these things. And the other 4 that you shared were pretty cool, but how do you bring it all together? I'm a VP of marketing. I've got all these things going on, and I'm loving what you're saying, Grant, but what do I do with it?
Our starting point with people typically is we have to follow scientific method. So typically scientific method, there's a problem. Well, there's a better way to do that with your team. So we call them burning questions, mostly because we're extremely clever. But I would say, write down 3 to 5 things that you would consider to be burning questions at your organization. And then take that to your leadership team. It's much easier to communicate problems as questions than it is as statements. So, and you can convert those easily into statements later, but questions always makes a really good dialogue. So if we say, all right, if we've got a goal, right, our goal is to grow 20% top line revenue year over year, right, whatever. What's keeping you from doing that? That's a starting point. So, we have this product that we expected to do really well, and it's underperforming. Why aren't customers buying this product like we expected? How do we minimize customer churn, right? Because we're churning at 8% higher than we expect, and that's having a big impact on our growth numbers. If you communicate and think about problems as questions, they're not only they're actually a little bit easier to solve, but they're easier to communicate to your internal team. The second thing I would do will be much more controversial, which is write down like the 5 reasons that you think your customers are buying from you. And then pick one as the top one, because they're not all equal. One of them is going to be in first place. So it's a good exercise that you can do with your leadership team. Here are the 5 reasons that we think people buy from us. Obviously, if you say quality or customer service, you should cross it off because you weren't listening. But write down the 5 things and then pick one that's in first place and do that, and kind of do that with your executive team. And you'll probably find that there's a lot more misalignment than you think. And you don't have to have a fancy test to do it. That'll probably get you there.
Awesome.
Bingo.
Awesome. All right. Well, Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great. Lauren, are there any questions that came out of chat that we haven't already covered that would be good? We've got about 3 or 4 minutes here before we got to call it a day.
Yeah, there's one from Alexandra, and she's basically wondering if simple language works better. How do you explain to a leadership team that says, hey, our customer's super sophisticated, so we can talk to them in this sophisticated language? How do you skin that cat?
Great question.
Well, like a term of art thing, term of art is real, especially in the scientific community. So we have lots of clients that are in they're pharma, or they're in biological or chemical research and stuff like that. You have to have people that can communicate in those terms. But that doesn't mean that, think about marketing and sales, like if you're a chemist, just because you understand chemistry does not mean you're good at sales. That means you can communicate the subject matter expertise to the buyer. So there's nothing wrong necessarily with using terms of art when you're communicating to somebody that knows who it is. It's one of the, when we're in those industries, we typically try to get that nailed down really quickly. Hey, what are things that you could say that everyone's going to know? Because essentially they come out of the gate and they go, well, we want to test about this, and it's like real fancy. And I'm like, all right, is everybody going to know what that means? Because I think you assume that people know what that means because it's what you do all day here, but it could be a very small percentage of what some of your customers are doing. And you might be losing them immediately because they don't know what that is, right? To Ryan's point earlier. So start simple. You can always go complicated. I don't personally like having, organizations do this all the time. They take a biologist or a chemist or a scientist that's a subject matter expert and they put them in a sales role. That's terrible. Take somebody that, like, salespeople are a different breed, and you can always bring in an expert if you need that expert. But it's very rare that you see a subject matter expert that is good at closing business and bringing money into your company.
I was actually doing a talk one time and I was using the term ICP. And I think on the third time I used it, somebody raised their hand and they said, do you mean insane clown posse?
Exactly.
And I'm like, yeah, it's like in our world, it's ideal customer profile. So, and I was just using it like everybody in the room understood it. And every time I said it, they were thinking about some grunge band, it's crazy.
That's that whole clapping happy birthday and expecting someone to know exactly what you're thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, we've got like 2 minutes left. Grant, I thank you so much for joining us today. There's on the agenda, there's a link to Grant's LinkedIn profile. There's also a link to Proof Positioning's website. And in the resource section, there is a link to their research and their papers, which I think, you referenced them a couple of times today, Grant, just about, some of the research that you've done. So it'd be interesting if you guys find this fascinating to go be sure to check that out. And then next month on deck for June, I can't believe we're literally halfway through 2025. That just is so mind-boggling to me. But we have Jen Allen Knuth joining us next month. She's an amazing sales coach. So people, all the Fortune 500 companies, B2Bs especially, hire her to do sales kickoffs and things like that. But we brought her in to talk about sales and marketing alignment because I don't know about you, but everybody that we talk to still, I don't know why 25 years later, we still have sales and marketing alignment problems. One of the reasons we may be because we're not looking at it from the sales side of the table. So we've asked Jen to come in. She's going to join us next month, and we're going to see if we can finally crack the code on sales and marketing alignment. You can register for that in the agenda. So thank you guys for joining us. Grant, thank you. Great job today. I learned a ton, and we'll see you guys next month. Thanks, everybody. Take care.